Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, Greg Anthony here, and welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this March 30th, 2017 day on our calendar. And all week long I've been talking about the real story of Islam and where Muhammad came from, all these questions. Is Islam a religion of tolerance or intolerance, etc., etc.? And I found something really interesting that I want to present to you today. Did Muhammad really exist? But before I get that, let me clear off a few emails I've gotten this week, which are interesting. And the first one asked me, could you please update me on the Tony Alamo story? Are you getting close to sending the information to President Trump's pardon attorney? Okay, let me answer this. All next week, I'll be doing shows on the Tony Alamo story. Again, I've done them for the last, decade. And let me tell you this, there's compelling evidence that first, this man was framed. He shouldn't be spending time in jail. He's been there for a decade almost on a 175-year sentence. Compelling evidence the children were stolen or kidnapped by the state. And thirdly, there's compelling evidence that they're basically, the state is trying to steal their property. And so I want to get all of this into a very concise amount of information to be sent to the pardon attorney. The only problem is the pardon attorney for Trump has not yet been selected. So I've checked and sent a couple emails, and they are backlogged, haven't done much in that office. So we're going to wait a little while until Trump's attorney gets there. I think that would be the best chance of getting Tony released. Okay, so we're going to do a whole bunch of shows next week, and you can tune in for that. Secondly, I got an email, and this was centered towards, remember we did some shows on the flat earth compared to, and is it biblical? Is it biblical that the earth is flat, or is it round and stationary? Okay, it's biblical that it is stationary, the center of the universe, not the sun. But the question becomes, is it flat or round? Well, the emailer sent me and said, will you please tell Nicholas that the earth is flat? And I did not write the guy back, but my thinking is this. We should do a little bit more research, and I know some people think it's round, some people think it's flat and stationary, and I recommend this man write Nicholas about that. And as far as I'm concerned, my mind is open, and I'm listening to everyone. Okay, another guy emailed me, and this is the last one, then we'll get to the main topic of today's show, which I think you'll find fascinating. I'm always looking for this stuff because it's my contention that, I did get an email. I should straighten this out. Guy emailed and said that I was picking on Islam, that I'm racist, and I should not talk about Islam in that manner. And I said, listen, I'm an equal opportunity critic when it comes to all of these major religions. And Catholicism, if you look at my body of my work, I've criticized the religion I was born into way more than I have Islam. And basically started looking at Islam when the war, or this fake war on terror, was being propagated by the Vatican and the powers that be. So I've been looking into it. And the one thing I found that people do, they really don't look at the origins of their religion. And I'm talking about the origins of Catholicism or Islam. They also don't look at some of the deceptions. Now, I grew up in Catholicism, and I've seen many of them. One, telling me that Peter is the first pope. It's not true. And the way they told me Catholicism originated really doesn't make sense if you really start studying it. And I'm finding the same thing out with Islam. So I'm not picking on Islam at all. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it. I think what I found today, and we may have to do 2 shows on it, is quite interesting. Now, the next one is kind of interesting. This guy emails me and says, Greg, I've been listening to your show for many years, and you used to do a lot more comedy on your shows, and you also did a lot more satire. And then he said to me, he remembers when I did the recent, all these episodes on the greatest off-Broadway stage play, etc., etc. He says, can't you just get a little lighter? What's going on? In the last month, you've been so serious. And I said to him, I emailed back and I said, listen, it's not easy to be funny when you've been inflicted with a cough that doesn't seem to go away. And it's not like you have the flu. It's like this nagging cough. And then I started researching that and found out there's an epidemic in many places in America, this strange cough that doctors say doesn't go away, should for 3 weeks to a month. I've had mine a little longer. But it's not debilitating. It's not like you have the flu. It's just very, very annoying. And anyway, so I found out there's an epidemic in the UK, and people are coming down with the same symptoms. And the doctors say there's no cure. You just got to let it go away. Of course, you got to, take care of yourself, etc., etc. So that's why it's limited my comedic ability in the last month or so. But as you can tell, my voice is getting almost back to normal. But if you have any information on this and you're out there, I know there's been epidemics. I know many people around where I live in San Diego have the same thing. It's crazy. And I was thinking maybe it has something to do with chemtrails. So if you have any thoughts on it, and there's people, thousands of them in the UK coming down with this. I also found out there was this going on in certain parts of Italy. Then I found out in Mankato, I think that's Minnesota. In Mankato, the same thing came up. I know people in San Diego here have been talking about it. So let me know. So for my good friend who wants me to be a little lighter and funnier, I really will try to do that in the future. Okay, we'll get back to that. So let's get on with, did Muhammad exist? Okay, I am going to play a presentation. It's called The Suppressed and Hidden History of Islam, and it's quite interesting. But let me read this to you, and I think you'll find this to be enlightening, because I've said many times that there's possibilities that the Vatican, and strong probabilities, that the Vatican had its hand in creating Islam. And in fact, when you look at one of the possibilities, is Islam more nefarious strategy by Rome's mystery religion agents through murder and suppression of true history, among other things, to use as a fierce attack dog for decimating the world population, as is already occurring in order to usher in a one world order. That's something we have to think about. But this gentleman wrote a book, and it's he does a long presentation, an hour video on it, and it's banned in some countries. He's a seasoned author from UK, attempts to find the archaeological evidence for the alleged Arabian prophet of Islam outside of the Quran and the Hadiths, the written words that you find, which basically, when you start looking into, and I've read the Quran, or most of it, it's not a religion of tolerance. And they do not preach, for example, true Bible-believing Christianity preaches love your neighbors, not cut their heads off, as Islam does. So he was searching this out, venturing to the lands in question, seeking hard key historical evidence. Spencer's book, Did Muhammad Exist? Here's a review from it. Essentially, Spencer maintains that the Arabian Empire came first. The theology came later. He concludes, a careful investigation makes at least one thing clear. The details of Muhammad's life that have been handed down as as law that he unified Arabia by force of arms, concluded alliances, married wives, legislated for his community, and did so much else, are a creation of political ferment dating from long after the time he is supposed to have lived. Similarly, the records strongly indicate that the Quran did not exist until long after it was supposed to have been delivered to the Prophet of Islam. So he asked the question, did Muhammad really exist as they tell us? As a prophet of the Arabs who taught a vaguely defined monotheism, he may have existed, but beyond that, his life story is lost in the mists of legends, like those of Robin Hood and Macbeth. As the prophet of Islam, who received or even claimed to receive the perfect copy of the perfect eternal book from the supreme God. Now, I may add, boy, who better than to create this religion than the Vatican, if you look back at history. And if you look at, we've done shows on how they created the Church of Latter-day Saints, most likely. And we had historical evidence showing they were very much involved in creation of that religion. What else have they done? They've created the New Age movement. They're in the business of creating fake religions. And I remember just the other day I was walking my dog, and I knew the Latter-day Saints were coming. They're dressed in their ties, and they had their backpacks, and I knew they were going to question me, and I've had this happen 3 or 4 times in my life. So they said, hey, can we talk to you about the Church of Latter-day Saints? I said, yes, on one condition. If you listen to me, that your church may have, and probably was created by the Vatican. Oh, boy. We didn't go much farther, and I continued to walk my dog. But as the prophet, so we're looking at this. As the prophet of Islam who received or even claimed to receive the perfect copy of that eternal book, remember? Muhammad almost certainly, he's saying, may or may not have existed. Almost certainly. It's up in the air, he says. There are too many gaps, too many silences, too many aspects of the historical record that simply do not accord and make me believe, says the author, that he did not really exist and was a creation of someone for some reason, and cannot be made to an accord with the traditional account of Arabian prophet teaching his Quran, energizing his followers to such an extent that they were out and conquered a good part of the world. Now, another thing interesting, the Vatican, there's evidence showing that they wrote Mein Kampf, a Jesuit priest named Father Stampfel, not Hitler. And we have solid evidence that Pope Pius XII was Hitler's mentor. Well, the question's asked, how did Muslims respond to Spencer's book? Some may seek to curse the author. I imagine some want to kill him. They may respond in outrage, but that will not disprove the facts presented here. Now, I say this. Many people respond in outrage when I call the Pope the Antichrist, a member of the Antichrist system. Many Catholics act the same way. So I'm used to that. But Islam, according to this author, is supposed to be a religion based on history. So is Catholicism, right? But you find when you research Catholicism, they have changed history. They have carved it out and dealt it to us in a phony deck of cards that they gave to us. Have they done the same with Islam? But if history will not support the claim of Catholicism or Islam, I'm saying, is it time for not only Catholics but Muslims to rethink the legitimacy of both of these religions, which always seem to be at the center of death and destruction, as Catholicism was during the Reformation and the Inquisition, and now Islam, again, rearing its ugly head on this fake, what I call, war on terror. But, again, blind commitment to these teachings of a local imam will not be enough, or blind teachings and listening to Jesuits isn't enough. In this age of instant information, we can find out a lot more quickly, but then we have to back it up with solid facts. Now, the other day I was listening to, and I have to listen to the left and the right wing TV shows, and Bill O'Reilly was touting himself as a historian. He writes all these books, Killing Jesus, Killing Lincoln, never getting to this point of the Jesuits. And I say, Bill, what kind of historian are you if you really don't research the books to the, pull away all the levels, all the pieces of the onion, right? Now, the Syro-Aramaic, which Arabic comes out of, the word Muhammad, is not a private name, but an honorable title, the praised anointed one, a Greco title reference to the Arab to Christ of the Bible in Syria, vicinity, and this is really complicated as I'm reading it here. But we get to the point that the Arab prophet, unable to be found outside of the Quran, minus a few spurious sources from monks, that could be a big hint. So what you're finding when this author found that once you get away from the written Quran and Hadith, maybe the only sources he was finding were monks, which are Catholics. So did they create it, I ask? Unable to be corroborated, verified by other contemporaneous sources satisfactorily. Thus, is it a mystery religion? Who created it? Thereby being suspect as to grave error in translation, understanding either by deliberate device for men's desire to conquer the world, or due to general illiteracy of such populations of these times in such areas, which would have aided significantly in dispersing this erroneous translation of what Islam, the Prophet, was really all about, right? Now, the same thing I find was done in Christianity. And think of this. For the student who diligently, seeks and studies factual ancient classical history, says the author, digs even deeper, they find Islam's monotheistic position begins with Constantinople Christianity. Wow, has already been in the same area since the mid-3rd century, seeking converts. Could modern Islam be a Roman Greco-Byzantine cult that could be called Arabian, intermingled consequently with various anti-biblical ideologies and religions of different flavors, which Roman Greco-Christianity basically is depending on? Where is it in the world, as in the case of Islam, thus giving Islam its start around 700 AD? Official evidence, not tradition. With eerie clues being how closely the headdress of the Islamic women and Roman and Constantinople nuns covering is an example. Or, like I said earlier, is Islam a more nefarious Rome-Vatican strategy created to cause murder and suppression of their enemies? And is it raised its ugly head again today, creating this one world order that's coming about today? So let's get to this gentleman's presentation here. I want to listen to this. We've got about 6 minutes on this side of the break, and I'll get about half of it today, so it'll give you a reason to come back tomorrow. The suppressed and hidden history of Islam.
1400 years ago, armies of nomads swept out of the Arabian desert and conquered half the world. Today, their descendants tell an extraordinary story. They say that God sent them a prophet, Muhammad, and that God then gave them an empire. But is it really true? Not everyone is so sure. The Muslim conquests were one of the most decisive events in history. But were the Arabs in the 7th century even Muslims at all?
Islam, the untold story.
My name's Tom Holland. I'm a historian. I write about ancient empires, so Persian, Greek, Roman empires. And now I want to write about the most influential of all the ancient empires, the empire founded by the Arabs in the 7th century, the empire that gave us Islam. I thought that it would be a relatively simple matter. It's been said that Islam was born in the full light of history. But when I began on the project, I discovered that that wasn't actually the case at all. When it comes to Islam's beginnings, There is no full light of history, only a kind of darkness. And when you start looking, everything seems up for grabs. From the beginning, I felt like I was being sucked into a black hole.
The problem of writing the history of the rise of Islam is that we have absence of evidence, and we have nothing on which to tell a story.
I had expected Muslim testimony from the 7th century, but there's nothing there. I can't find anything. There's a problem here.
Yes, there is. And we'll get right to that. Okay, we're back. We had a problem here. The internet went out, but we're back online. Here we go.
You're delving into the origins of Muslims' deepest beliefs, but where is the historical evidence?
Sometimes the belief of the believer and the understanding of the scholar cannot be squared.
There's a choice between doing history and not doing history. And so I do the history even though it may hurt people.
You have to say things that believers don't say, things that sometimes shock believers, things that sometimes make them very angry.
There's a sense of the detective story about it. Why do most of the clues seem to be missing? When the Romans conquered the Middle East, they left behind all kinds of evidence. Histories, inscriptions, coins. But with the Muslim conquest, silence. What can we actually say about Muhammad? What do we really know about the origins of Islam? Where to begin? Well, maybe we should start at the beginning of the 7th century. It is 5 minutes to midnight, and the ancient world is about to change forever. This is Istanbul. In 632, it was Constantinople. For 300 years, the capital city of the Roman Empire. A Christian city at the heart of a Christian world. A universal religion for a universal empire. That was the Roman recipe for power. An idea fully appreciated by the Muslims when, almost 1,000 years later, they conquered the city and turned the largest cathedral in Christendom into a mosque. We know how and when the Romans became Christian because contemporaries tell us all about it. But what we don't know is how the Arabs became Muslim. Take a journey into the past, and you can't be certain where it's going to end. History is like a labyrinth. Once you're inside, who knows where it may lead.
Okay, I'm going to take a break here right now because we're running out of time in this half hour. And I hope you come back because this is great information. And always love to delve into more Vatican intrigue. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it: to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour, so let's get back to the suppressed and hidden history of Islam. Quite interesting, and it's always, it seems to me that when we talk about the Vatican, we talk about secret societies, all the things they hide from us so they can exist using Catholicism as a cover. Well, the same thing seems to be showing up here in Islam, and the connection between the two may be closer than you think. Here we go. By the way, this man's name is Tom Holland from England doing the research.
So here we are, the great palace of the Roman emperors of Christian Constantinople. Odd to think that at the start of the 7th century, when Muhammad was still alive, this was pretty much the center of the world. There's one awful poetry about the fact that all you've got here is splintered firewood. Because what this is something that's been smashed to smithereens. And what what it preserves just the faintest trace of is what was at the time the hub of the greatest power on the face of the earth. So this is the White House, it's where the Emperor lives, it's the Pentagon, it's the heart of the defense establishment, it's the Supreme Court, it's where laws are drawn up and made and issued, all in this one place that dominates Constantinople, the city of Constantine, the first Christian empire, the greatest city in the world. And now it's all gone. And it's in some bloke's garden. You've got the road on one side, you've got the train on the other. And the only thing to be seen is a cat. By 630, the Roman Empire had just overcome the worst crisis in its history. Its old enemies, the Persians, had overrun its fairest provinces. Persian troops had reached the very walls of Constantinople itself. Then, after 25 years of war, the Persians were defeated. The Roman Emperor was, once again, master of the universe. At such a moment, how could he have had any conceivable idea of the ruin that the heavens had in store for him?
Islam, the Untold Story.
Professor, can someone like myself, who is not a Muslim and who does not believe that God spoke to Muhammad, ever hope to fathom the truth of the origins of Islam?
No.
That was quite interesting. The Prophet Muhammad was an Arab like us.
Bedouin, the face of the Arab conquest. The shock troops who in the 7th century swept out of Arabia and forged a colossal empire spanning half the world. And here in the desert, no one doubts that the conquerors were indeed Muslim.
The Prophet and his friends, they didn't care about worldly things, trade, or anything. It didn't matter. They might be killed, or starve, or lose their way. I was for the success of Islam.
Everything was for Islam. That's what they say today. The victories, the conquest, the empire. But how do we know Islam even existed back then?
The Prophet started everything. That's what we live for now. We are their progeny. We are their descendants.
To the ancients, the Arabs were notorious savages. Of all the peoples of the earth, the most despised and insignificant.
Oop. Here we go. We're losing the internet again. Now, it never fails. You know, this thing never goes out, and then you do a real important segment, and it goes out. So I'll get this fixed in a second, so hold on. Okay, we are back in business.
Yet after 10 years, in the first half of the 7th century, they deprived the Roman Empire of her richest provinces, crushed the Persian Empire, and taken possession of most of the Middle East. A staggering achievement. For most Muslims, a miracle. Only God could have made it happen.
Bedouin Arabs. They're the margin of history during the Roman Empire.
that through such a people, the whole of North Africa and Spain should be transformed in just a few decades, and a whole new civilization created within a century from China to France. This is a historical fact.
And it all began, the story goes, when a merchant named Muhammad in a mountain cave heard something as terrifying as it was awesome, the voice of an angel. O Muhammad, thou art the apostle of God. God had spoken to the Arabs.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
The message was as clear as it was elemental.
Allahu Akbar.
There is only one God. Muhammad is the prophet of God.
Sami Allah.
Islam is submission to God. And it was this message that gave them an empire. Or was it?
Allahu Akbar.
No one doubts the conquests really took place. But the question is, was it because of Islam?
If you were a Christian or a Jew or follow of another religion for whom a similar reality exists, it'd be easier to make a jump. There's a very famous Arabic proverb which says, not being able to know something is no proof that it doesn't exist.
But making that jump, taking a leap of faith, isn't as easy as it sounds. In Western universities, historical research is all about skepticism and doubt. And just as earlier generations of scholars turned a penetrating spotlight on the life of Jesus, so now some are taking a radical new look at the life of Muhammad. Patricia Kroner is a professor at Princeton. She is one of a number of historians whose research into the roots of Islam has sharply divided the world of early Islamic studies. You cannot reject the Muslim story, she wrote, but you cannot accept it either. The only solution is to step outside of the Islamic tradition and start again.
There is a curtain as regards Muhammad that you can't get behind.
What do we know about him and his life?
Well, we know that he existed. We know that he was active somewhere in Arabia. We know that he's associated with the book, the Quran. He was the one who uttered it. But it doesn't get us to what actually happened, which is what, of course, a historian would like to reconstruct. We have absence of evidence. We have the Quran. You can't tell the story on the basis of the Quran. We have various early non-Muslim sources. They don't add up to a story. We have nothing. We have this one book out of and nothing. There's complete darkness.
But here, that's not the way they see things. The Bedouin think they know everything about Muhammad. His character, his wives, even his favorite food. This is a whole world founded on stories of Muhammad.
The Prophet lived he lived. It's the only animal the Bedouin know. This is how we live. The camel. We endure with patience. Muhammad had a camel. Patience is a virtue. We endure without food and water, just like the Prophet Muhammad. This is how the armies of Islam were able to cross the desert and spread the word of Islam.
But the problem is, how do we know this was what it was like? How can we separate what really happened from the hearsay and the myths? Do we know, did the Prophet Muhammad come here?
Yes.
When he was traveling from Mecca, that's when he came. The Prophet rested under a tree in a place called Safawa.
Was there a tree? Was Muhammad even a traveling merchant? The evidence is almost non-existent. The earliest biographies we have were written nearly 200 years after Muhammad's lifetime.
In most religions, the tradition was handed down through oral history for millennia. This is put aside. That was called positive history. The oral tradition is completely negated.
Well, oral tradition means that you remember what you want. Some of it must be history, and most of it is clearly not history. It's just that they have been reshaped, rethought. They have been taken out of their original context, serving new functions. They've been cleaned up by all kinds, or cleaned up or messed up, if you like, by all kinds of interests that people have in the memory.
If supposing there is no written text at the time of the Prophet mentioning his name, the same is true of Christ. The same is true of Moses. That doesn't mean anything because there's always the oral tradition.
Sometimes if you have other sources from other points of view, you can suddenly see what it is that's been changed, and then when you can see that, you can also see why it has changed. But because Islam arose in a relatively remote corner of the world, we don't have these checks. We don't yet have the key that can unlock the tradition.
I came here to get close to the tradition. And when you're here, you can feel its weight. It's in the air. It's palpable. It can't just be brushed aside. Millions upon millions of people believe it. This is their history. An entire moral universe has been built around the stories told of Muhammad.
I was in the age of ignorance before Islam. When a man had a daughter, he would slaughter her. They saw her as a dishonor. He would take her and bury her alive. One of the followers had a daughter. He went to bury her. And as he dug the hole, when the sand blew on his beard, she would gently brush it off him. But he buried her alive. But the Prophet came and put an end to these terrible practices.
Listening to all these stories, part of me very moved. the other part of me was wondering, well, how do you know this? Where do these stories come from? Are they really true?
Gradually in the West, for the intellectual elite, the sense of the sacred was lost. Tribal person in Africa or in the Amazon has a natural sense of the sacred, whereas a graduate student at Oxford probably doesn't.
Allahu Akbar.
They're in the desert saying their prayers.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah.
There they go, bowing to the east.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
Tom Holland's there watching, taking it all in. I mean, I'm thinking back about the cave where Muhammad supposedly came from. And I'm thinking how the Vatican always created this Mother Mary image in a cave, and how both are basically the cave is a pagan symbol. And so we move forward with Islam, the untold story.
In some places, you have to be careful where you tread. Muslims believe that from the very beginning, the great Arab conquests were all about Islam. But in the 7th century, you can barely find a new religion called Islam anywhere in the historical record. And that's why I've come here.
Okay, we'll be back in a second. Okay, we're back. Someone doesn't want me to play this today, I think. I never have a bad connection, but here we go.
This is Jerusalem. They've been building walls here for a long time. But they've never built a wall yet that could keep people safe forever. Historically, the capital city of God has always been one of the world's most conquerable places. Here, if anywhere, in the one-time world of the Roman Empire, the 6th and 7th centuries live on. The same intensities, the same anxieties. For thousands of years, Jerusalem had been shaped and mapped by the religions of its rulers. When the Jews ruled, they built a gigantic temple which dominated the city. Later, when the Roman Empire became Christian, Jerusalem was transformed into the world center of Christian pilgrimage. Look at the street plan now, and you saw a map of a Christian world. The Jews were gone, airbrushed out of the picture. The Romans constructed a new Holy of Holies, the Holy Sepulchre, a vast cathedral raised over the traditionally accepted site of Jesus' crucifixion. That was how God and empire worked. The Roman Empire believed in God, and God believed in the Roman Empire. But then, in the year 636, God changed his mind. Arab marauders appear outside the walls. Sophronius, the city's bishop, writes that it is too dangerous to leave. The Arabs were closing in, and there was nothing people of Christian Jerusalem could do about it except to stay where they were, look out from their walls, and await the arrival of the Arabs. And out of the desert they came, and they had become irresistible. In 636, they beat a Roman army at Yarmouk. Soon after, they beat a Persian army at Qadisiyah. Both empires too weak after their own long wars to resist the Arabs. They marched into the richest provinces of the defeated empires. And less than 5 years after the death of Muhammad, they set their eyes upon the promised land. The land flowing with milk and honey, the land that God had promised to the Jews. Now, the Arabs had come to claim that birthright for themselves. The children of Israel had made it a Jewish land. The Romans had made it a Christian, holy land. If the Arabs did arrive with a new religion, then we should be able to find its imprint here.
Okay, I got to break it off there. A good place to break it off and leave you hanging so you come back tomorrow. We got about 28 minutes through that, but we're going to finish it up tomorrow because I find it quite interesting. And, boy, a lot of questions. But we're going to look closer at how the Vatican was perhaps instrumental in creating Islam. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.